Rats. I'm here at ICC playing a 45-minute pool game. I have the white pieces, and I'm going to play the King's Indian Attack, also known as the chess opening for you, and share my thoughts as the game progresses. I have a low-rated opponent, but I'm not going to treat him lightly. I'm just going to go ahead and do what I do. Okay, so he's copying me. Now the next step is to develop the queen side. And I'll continue with d3, eventually c3, e4, knight bd2, a4, knight c4, queen c2, and maybe bishop d2 as I've been playing a couple games last night at 15-0. And we'll see how he wants to play against this system. Okay, so while we're waiting for his move, a couple of things about this opening I've discovered. If you play carefully, you're not going to lose. In other words, well, you could lose to a stronger player, but against anybody close to you, you shouldn't get a bad game. You get all your pieces developed, which is important. How many games get lost because one side carries on some kind of a fantasy attack or variation and ends up not getting all the men out of the box. And since it's solid, white really has no weaknesses in his position. He's going to get through the opening unscathed and then commence a middle game where all the pieces are actively placed and developed, and carefully select the variation and head down for an end game. Okay, so again, I'm just going through some routine moves. My next move will be e4. He might try the treatment of, okay, e5, and I play e4, and he might try d4. And I'm not too worried about that. That gives me the c4 square back. And even if I end up with an isolated backward pawn on d3, if there's some exchanges, d takes c3 and I play b takes c3, I'm not too worried about that. It gives me some good squares. I get e3 for a bishop or a knight, and just go about my business. But the question is, how deep is this position for him? He's got to find a reasonable plan, and so far he is. He's getting his pieces developed. Okay, so he did play e5. Now I'm going to go ahead with e4, and again, I'm just holding it over the square. If he plays d4, I'll just let him, and I'll probably follow up with a4, and then knight c4, and if he takes on c3 with his pawn, I'll take back with my b pawn, and I'm not worried about having a backward pawn on the open d file. Okay, so, and if he takes on e4, that's fine too. I take back with the pawn. So there, he played d4. Okay, so here, let's just see where we've come. To some degree, one might say, well, why should you allow black to have so much space? This looks something like an opening that white would play, like in a Benoni or something. For instance, if I play c4 here, we've kind of taken on a Benoni reversed. And some players might want to play c4 here, or not want to play c4 here for that reason. Okay, so let's just consider it for a second. c4 is perfectly playable for white. I'm not saying I'm going to play it, but I want to discuss it. Okay, what does c4 do? Well, essentially what c4 does is it does make this a Benoni position reversed. Okay, that's fine. Now, strategically, I have two breaks to make on the board. Pawn to f4 and pawn to b4, and neither one is anywhere close to being ready to be played, but those are my thematic breaks. And his thematic breaks are to play for b5 and f5, And if you don't follow those strategies, chances are the other side will be following his strategies and will eventually generate some play and some activity as a result. I'm almost tempted just to play c4 to show how that's true. But the other choice that I can do here is play pawn a4, as this is something I was explaining. Now let's just talk about me getting a backward pawn on d3 if he takes d takes c4. Well, I take back with my pawn b takes c4, and this position actually comes up in the King's Indian defense a number of times with colors reversed, where black accepts the backward pawn on the open file. Well, he's not poised to take advantage of it. Okay, so the first step is, well, let's see what happens if black does try to take advantage of it. Okay, move the queen up to d6. Well, you don't want to go there because knight c4 is coming. Okay, so let's put the queen on d7. Really not a good move because it blocks in the bishop. So let's not move the queen yet. Let's put the bishop on e6. Now, if he puts the bishop on e6, I can chase it with knight g5. Okay, so where is he going to put his bishop? Okay, let's put it on g4. Okay, let's let him do what he wants to do. Now I play knight c4. And there's a couple of neat things about the white position here. First, I'm threatening his pawn on e5. Okay, and I have a number of ways to defend d3 if he even attacks it and he's not even close. I can play rook to d1. At some point I can play knight to f1, and if need be, bring the bishop back to f1 if everything gets cleared. At the same time, I can put my bishop on e3, which attacks a pawn on c5. I can put the knight from c4 on e3, which attacks his bishop on g4, and then put my bishop on a3, pressuring him on c5. So for accepting the backward pawn on the open file, white really gains a lot. And if you think about it, just look at so many Sicilian defenses that black plays. How often does black have a pawn on d6 and that's backward? Well, it's not necessarily backward. There'll be a pawn on e6 next to it, but it can't be defended by a pawn. And white has pressure on the d file, but can't do anything. He can never win that pawn. And maybe at some point black finally gets d5 in, but whether he does or doesn't is not really important. It's just that just having a backward pawn on that d file is not the end-all solution to a bad game for white. So, like I say, what I'm going to play here, I'm going to go ahead and try to demonstrate this. I think it's better than just allowing a Benoni reversed. And I'll go ahead and play a4 with the idea of playing knight c4. Okay, and I could play knight c4 right away here. It has a tempo on e5, makes him stop and defend it. So that's the other candidate move. Let's just consider that for a moment before I move. We have time on the clock. Okay, if I play knight c4, if he tries b5, and I just got to make sure my knight doesn't get trapped somehow. Let's see. Okay, I play knight c4. Now suppose he tries b5, just to take away c4 from my knight. Now I take knight takes e4, or e5, from knight c takes e5. Now I'm attacking his knight on c6. And if he exchanges on e5, I just take back with my knight, and my knight on e5 has flight squares. He'll get back home safely. So maybe I can save a tempo for this with knight c4, because what this does is it stops and makes him do something that he may not want to do otherwise. He might play rook e8 to guard that pawn. He might play queen e7 or queen c7. But like I say, it just takes a move from him, and one of those moves might be a move he doesn't want to play. I'd like to entice him into playing bishop g4, queen d7, and bishop h3, and trade off my bad bishop on g2, but that's kind of ambitious. So I think for the illustrative purposes of this position, I'm going to play knight c4 and just pick up a tempo, and then I'll anchor the knight in with a4 next move. Okay. Knight c4, and again I don't mind if he plays d takes c3 because I'll take back with the b pawn. Another thing too, with my pawn formation like that, at some point, not yet, not until I got my development completed, I might have a break of my own with d4. Nowhere close to being ready to do that, but it's something I could do down the line depending on how the middle game ensues. Okay, so now I've taken his rook to e8. As I said, he would have to do something, and each one of those has pluses and minuses. Now his rook is off the f-file, so if he tries to play an f5 later, which he's not ready for, of course, some of the sting of it's gone because his rook is not on the f-file. Okay, so now I play a4 and await developments. Okay, so he might try to slow play this with b6, a6, and then try b5. But again, I don't mind that too much. Okay, so now he's played bishop e6, and as I explained earlier, if he does a move like that, I can chase it with knight g5. Now, do I want to do that in this position? That is the question. Okay, so let's evaluate knight g4. Okay, or sorry, knight g5. I'm so dyslexic. Okay, what he's done is it seems like he's hung e5. Okay, now there's some tactics involved here. He can get a discovery on my knight, but I can do some things too. So let's just evaluate knight from c takes e5. Okay, if he does nothing, I'll just bring the knight back to c4 or exchange it on c6, and I'll be ahead a pawn. So let's just assume he exchanges knights on e5, and then his move is knight takes e4. Okay, when he plays knight takes e4, I can take back with the bishop, and he takes my knight on e5. Now we've got the knights off the board, and looks like his pawn on b7 is hanging. Okay, so I take it. He plays rook b8. Now I got to deal with my bishop, so where do I want to put it? e4 or g2? g2 looks the safe square. Okay, now what can he do? He can take on c3. I take on c3. Now, like I say, I'm a pawn ahead. He's got some development on it for the pawn. He's got both his bishops out. I only have one out, and his queen rook is developed. But he's also down two pawns here. Or no, just one pawn. I'm sorry. He's also down a pawn, and he's got moves like bishop b3. Okay, or I don't think rook c3 really has a lot of merit. So bishop b3 chases my queen, kind of puts me on a square I don't want to go. d2. Okay, now what's his follow-up? He could play queen a5. Now he's pressuring c3. Okay, so then I need to play a move like bishop d2. Now he can take on a4, but I'm not too worried about that. That walks him into a pin, and he's going to have to untangle from it. And I don't know, he's got some activity here for the pawn. So sometimes, you see a pawn is free, and yet when you play it out, it may not be free. So now the question is, how can I improve this variation? It bears looking at. So we have to reevaluate everything from the beginning and see if I have any kind of different choice I can employ and improve on that position. Because although white's a pawn ahead, black has a great deal of activity for it, and there's much easier ways to win a game of chess than to try to defend for a long time. Now, if you have to, if that's the best I can do, and I think that I can defend the position and eventually convert my pawn, then yes, I'll do it. And the stronger your opponent, the tougher task is at hand to you. And stronger is all relative. Stronger than you is all that counts. It doesn't matter. Like if I'm playing against a 2400, yeah, he's stronger than I am, but I still have to be very careful because he is stronger than I am. Now, if you're rated 1600 and your opponent's 1800 and this is happening, then it's still relative. He's still better than you, but you have more chances against him as long as you don't make an error, because you'll be the pawn ahead. So let's reevaluate this. Knight C takes E5. Now he takes twice, or he takes on E5, and I take back on E5. Now he takes on E4 with his knight, and I take on E4 with my bishop, and now he picks up the pawn on E5, regaining his pawn. Okay, so what I can do, oh, there's a trick I missed. Bishop takes B7, rook B8. What I do is I stop and play bishop C6. This gains a critical tempo. The purpose of putting the bishop on C6 means that before he can conduct any aggressive operations, he has to deal with that rook. Well, he could play bishop B3 here first. Let's just go ahead and do that, get it out of the way, and then queen D2, and now his rook has rook E6. So here I was going to say maybe now the idea that I drove him over to E8 is good because I pick up that critical tempo, but now he gets it back on me. He's getting the tempo back, and of course now I can shut the B file off and play bishop B5, and now my king is a little loose on the king side, but his bishop is loose too. He could play bishop D5 here with the idea of bishop D8, bishop A8 and queen D5 going for a checkmate. So not necessarily the best position. So taking that pawn on B7 is a little risky, simply because he gets some activity out of it. He gets onto the B3 square. So instead of taking that pawn on B7, what have I got? Well, I've got everything developed except for my queen's bishop. Do I have a good square for it? I can throw pawn to F4 on him and tempo his bishop and drive it back, but I don't know how that really helps me. It takes away potential squares from my bishop, so let's see. Bishop B7. Too bad I can't do it. It just looks like I can't. Okay, so C4. I could play C4 here, but that just doesn't seem to do too much. Okay, so I don't think taking the pawn is good. If I miss something, I'll find it later. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time deciding whether I can safely take it or not. I just not seeing any justifiable reason to capture it, because he seems to have some decent counterplay. But what the heck, let's look one more time. It can never hurt to try one more time, right? Okay, so knight C takes E5. Okay, now he plays knight takes E5. Now what do I have? I have knight takes E5, and then at this is the point that he plays knight takes E4. Of course, I have a move here as well. One thing I didn't consider, I was thinking of it earlier and I just forgot all about it. Suppose I play knight takes F7. Okay, knight takes F7 serves a useful purpose. It gains a tempo on his queen, and he needs to deal with that, right? Okay. If he does nothing, I'm going to take his queen. So he's not going to do nothing. He'll probably play bishop takes E6, and now I play bishop takes E4. Now here I've won a pawn, but it's not as critical of a pawn that that I've won. I have taken him off of he doesn't get on the B file and get that rook activated so this bishop can activate, and he doesn't have as much going here. And if he plays a move like Queen B6 with the idea of coming down to B3 with his bishop, I can throw A5 at him. I can just play C4, lock up the queen side, and go for the ending where I'm a pawn ahead. So it looks like, actually, now that I look at it a little deeper, there is a clear win of a pawn. So I'm going to do it, but I'm going to just talk about it just a little bit more before I do it, because we're not in any hurry here. I have 35 minutes on my clock. Hopefully I won't need to go into any other long discussion here. So but like I say, you have to give credit to your opponent that he'll find the best moves. Now he may not find the best moves, but we can't just sit there and say, well, I hope he doesn't find it, and he didn't see it last move, I'm hoping he won't see it this move. So we've got to go through with this. So I'll just play knight takes e5, and he plays knight takes e5, and I take on e5, and what other discoveries does he have with his knight? If he doesn't do anything, or with his bishop, if he doesn't do anything, I'll just drop the knight back to f3 and be a clear pawn up, right? He doesn't have enough development to justify giving up a pawn, so all he can do is play knight takes e4, and then I play knight takes f7, and he doesn't have a counter desperado with his knight on e4. So here it is, knight takes e5, and let's see what he does. Okay. So, long explanation to win a pawn. And some of you may say, well, why didn't you see that desperado earlier? Well, actually I did, but I forgot about it. It was there in my mind when I first visualized it, and I'm not trying to win any races here. I'm trying to win games. I'm trying to teach you how to win games. I have plenty of time on the clock. Oh, he did it right away. Okay, so I just gain a tempo on his knight. I mean on his queen. Oh, he resigned. Okay, well, so much for that game. Let's just take a look and see what's going to happen. Okay. He's on my knight, so I have to take something. If I take on e4, then he takes on e5, so the trick is to take on c6. Now that tempos his queen, and he needs to take back, and then it looks like I'm just a piece ahead here, right? He's got some nuisance value here, but I'm up a piece. He can play d3, okay, but I can deal with this. Okay, where do I go with the queen? Probably d1 is safer than d2, and I'll show you why. Because he's going to try to anchor the pawn in, but that shouldn't be a major concern. For the first, okay, the reason is I can do some tricks of my own. I can play knight d4 here, which seems good, and I'm trying to undermine everything he owns. I mean, by that I'm saying I'm on that bishop, I'm on a pawn. And I can also play bishop e3, which stops pawn c5. But at any rate, it was a short game, and White should eventually convert the point. I guess I'm just trying to show you a couple ideas. I mean, you're a piece ahead. He's got a pass pawn, but he can't really do anything with it. So if I just play bishop e3, he can, suppose he tries rook b8, and I play queen d2. Now I've blocked his, well, I give him take on, and I'm threatening to take on a7, so he's got to deal with that. Let's just play rook b7. And this is just a sample line, nothing's forced. Okay, at some point I want to get b3 and to undermine his pass pawn. That's a strategy that'll come up later, and I can do all kinds of things in the meantime. I can play A5 A6. I can play go back to some of these themes, the knight going into D4 or even the bishop going into D4. Point is, if just as a fantasy line, okay, just show this as a possibility, just to show the strategy. I'm getting closer to playing B3 now, and there's a lot of ways I can prepare that. Rook A3 or Rook A B1, then drop the queen back. There's a lot of ways I'm going to end up getting B3 and undermining his passed pawns. So it's just a matter of time before White wins this game. It will win, but not right away. You just got to grind it out. But when you're a piece ahead, it's pretty easy to find wins. I'm just trying to show you the strategy to get a win, and rather than just go try and conduct operations on the queen side or on the king side, I'll just solidify my game and consolidate and eventually win the game. All right, I'm going to cut this video short. I want to thank you for your time, for looking at it, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks for watching. Bye now.